Thunderous tremor rolled through the earth, followed by a heavy thump that shook the ground. And then came the monsters. They emerged one after another. These were no ordinary creatures. They were giants. The S-rank gate had opened. Monsters started pouring out. Monsters that were usually reserved as final bosses in A-ranked dungeons. Absolutely fire scene. Only this time, they weren't appearing one by one. They came in waves, and they were all giants. The hunters on standby were caught off guard. They weren't prepared for this. Fear gripped them as the first giant stomped through, each step shaking the earth beneath their feet. But in the middle of that chaos, Yuri Orlov stood calm, as if nothing fazed him. He took a final sip from his flask, tossed it aside, and activated the magic circle he had prepared. With hundreds of thousands of tons of mana crystals surrounding the area, a massive barrier surged to life. A powerful wall of magic locked the gate, blocking the giants from advancing any further. The air vibrated as energy surged through the circle, forming a protective dome. Invisible to the eye, but impossible to pass. The giants didn't understand what they were up against. They charged, slamming their colossal bodies into the barrier with brutal force, but it held strong, just as Yuri had planned. He watched them with a smug grin, confident in his magic, confident in himself. Nothing was getting through. But then, everything changed. Something far bigger pushed through the gate. A giant so massive it dwarfed the rest emerged from the shadows. It brushed aside the other giants and stood tall in front of the magic circle. Yuri's grin faded as he looked up at the towering figure. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his body didn't move. The colossal creature pulled out a sword that looked more like a slab of steel. It raised it, and in one devastating swing, shattered the barrier. For a split second, Yuri stood frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The impenetrable wall he had created was gone, and he was exposed. Before he could react, another giant's massive hand shot toward him. In a flash, it grabbed him. Yuri opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. The behemoth raised him into the air, opened its jaws, and swallowed him whole. Just like that, Yuri Orlov was gone, and with him, the only line of defense around the gate. Now unchecked, the giants stormed into the city, their roars echoing through the streets of Tokyo. The raid had failed. Tanks lined the streets, their cannons firing at maximum power, sending explosive rounds straight into the path of the advancing giants. Above, helicopters hovered with ruthless precision, unleashing a relentless hail of bullets and missiles. But it was all in vain. The giants pressed forward, unfazed by the barrage. Realizing the situation was slipping out of control, Rai gave the command. The Blade Guild moved instantly. Kana and Minoru launched into action, blades drawn and eyes locked on the closest threat. They struck with perfect coordination, aiming to take down the advancing giant before it could reach the city's inner blocks. But the creature reacted with inhuman speed. It sidestepped both attacks with ease. For a moment, Kana froze, stunned by how something that size could move with such fluidity. It made no sense. Giants weren't supposed to be this fast. And that's when it hit her. These monsters weren't just strong. They were smart, adaptable, far beyond what any of them had trained for. High above the battlefield, news helicopters hovered, broadcasting the carnage live from their vantage point. The destruction stretched across Tokyo. Skyscrapers crumbled, roads were split apart, and trees were ripped from their roots and hurled like debris. The camera zoomed in on one particular figure near the gate, the largest giant of them all. Unlike the others, it didn't rampage through the city. It just stood there, still and watchful, as though guarding the gate itself. Whether it was waiting for something or someone, no one knew.
One of the cameramen, his eye pressed to the viewfinder, whispered his own observation. Despite the giant's sheer size and slow, deliberate movements, it appeared lifeless, as though it wasn't truly alive. Its movements were too mechanical, too calculated, as if following commands it couldn't disobey. Destruction continued without end in sight. Flames consumed buildings, smoke choked the sky. In just 2 days, only 2 of the 30 giants had been taken down, and the damage was already catastrophic. The reporters in the sky began asking the same question that was on everyone's mind. How much longer could they hold out? Far from the front lines, Jin Wu sat in his apartment, silently watching the news unfold on the television. News anchors described the situation as apocalyptic. The footage spoke for itself: screams, explosions, collapsing towers. Tokyo's fall was unfolding live. Jin Wu leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. The scene reminded him of Jeju Island, the same helplessness, the same slow collapse. But this time, it was spreading. If left unchecked, all of Asia could fall. Jin Wu knew he couldn't wait any longer. Lost in thought, Jin Wu was pulled back to reality by a quiet voice. Turning around, he saw his sister Jenna standing in the doorway, her head lowered. She didn't say much, but the worry in her voice was clear as she pleaded with him not to go. He blinked, surprised. It wasn't like her to speak up like this. Jin Wu assured her he wasn't planning to go anywhere. He explained that he'd simply been working too much lately and needed to rest for a while. He stepped forward, gently tapped her on the head, and told her not to worry before walking past her, leaving the room in silence. Later, needing to clear his mind, Jin Wu stepped outside and went for a light jog. The chill in the air helped him think. Eventually, he came to a stop at a quiet park and sat on a bench, staring off into the distance. The images from Tokyo, the threat of the giants, the fear in Jenna's voice, it all swirled in his mind. Wanting to check on Jenna, he summoned Beirut, her overseer. His strongest summon materialized before him. Jin Wu casually asked if Beirut had been watching dramas again, instead of keeping an eye on her. Embarrassed, Beirut quickly assured him that nothing unusual had happened. Even so, Jin Wu couldn't shake the feeling in his chest. Something about Jenna's reaction felt different this time. She had never tried to stop him before. Not even once, except during his first raid 4 years ago. Jin Wu wondered if the orc attack on her school had left a deeper scar than he'd realized. The thought lingered, weighing heavily on his mind as he tried to decide what to do next. As Jin Wu walked toward his office, he heard the sound of a car approaching from behind. A black vehicle came to a gentle stop beside him. A representative from the Eugene Guild had arrived to pick him up. Without much conversation, he was quietly escorted to Yum Yongan's office for what seemed to be a private meeting. Curious about the sudden meeting, Jin Wu asked what business Yongan had with him. The man introduced himself, his tone direct and formal, before sliding a check across the table toward Jin Wu. It wasn't a bribe or an attempt to buy loyalty, he clarified. It was merely a gesture of sincerity. Jin Wu narrowed his eyes. This wasn't about guild recruitment or some corporate ploy. Whatever this was, it was personal. He asked Mongan what exactly he wanted. After a long moment of hesitation, the old man finally spoke. He suffered from the same illness that had once trapped Jin Wu's mother, eternal slumber. The words hit Jin Wu like a jolt. Eternal slumber wasn't something casually mentioned. He wondered immediately if Jin-Ho knew, but Mongan, already anticipating the question, explained that barely anyone was aware. Jin Wu was only the 4th person to know. As realization set in, Hyung-han's tone grew heavier. He clasped his hands tightly and confessed that during his desperate search for a cure, he had found only one case where someone had fully recovered. That person, of course, had been Jin Wu's mother, and he believed that was no coincidence. He wasn't asking for pity or favors. What he wanted from Jin Wu was the truth. Whatever it was that had brought his mother back, and if Jin Wu could offer even the smallest help, Mongan swore he would never forget it. Jin Wu sat silently for a while, the weight of the request settling in. Then, with a quiet breath, he pushed the check back and offered a calm apology. He didn't believe there was anything he could do. A flicker of desperation crossed Mongan's face, but Jin Wu remained firm. A crack appeared in Mongan's composed expression as he asked again, this time more softly, how Jin Wu's mother had been cured. Jin Wu didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted away as he spoke, saying that if he truly possessed such a secret and intended to use it for gain, he would have already made a move. The fact that he hadn't should speak for itself. That answer left no room for debate. Mongan nodded weakly, a man defeated not by rejection, but by helplessness. Jin Wu stood, his decision made, and walked toward the elevator. Once inside, he exhaled deeply, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. Despite everything, even knowing that Mongan was Jin-Ho's father, he couldn't bring himself to trust the man. He didn't know what kind of person he truly was or whether the illness was even real. What he did know was that the holy water of life couldn't be wasted, not when its power was so rare and finite. Whatever came next, he'd need to choose its use carefully. The next day, Jin Wu arrived at the Ajin Guild office, only to be met with Jin-Ho's wide-eyed shock. Jin-Ho could hardly believe what he was hearing when Jin Wu told him he was heading to Japan. His voice trembled as he tried to process it. This wasn't like Jeju Island. What was happening in Japan now was on a completely different scale. But Jin Wu, ever composed, simply said that if they could prevent the disaster, the Ajin Guild's name would be known across the globe. Jin-Ho, after a moment of silence, straightened his back and declared that if Jin Wu was going to Japan, then he would be going too. The sudden change caught Jin Wu off guard. He asked what he meant by that, genuinely surprised. Jin-Ho didn't raise his voice. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a bundle of old newspaper clippings and printed headlines, each highlighting Jin Wu's feats and accomplishments. His voice cracked as he admitted something he had held inside for too long. Not a single one of those reports ever mentioned his name. He confessed, between tears, that it made him feel useless, like his efforts meant nothing. The only thing he could truly be proud of was standing by Jin Wu's side. That's why he wanted to go. Not for fame, not for glory, but because being by Jin Wu's side gave him purpose. Jin Wu let out a small sigh, reminding himself that just moments ago he had been against going to Japan at all. So what changed? The answer came without hesitation. Jin-Ho looked at him and said he trusted him. As long as Jin Wu was there, he felt safe. A soft chuckle escaped Jin Wu as he stood up. He glanced back and told Jin-Ho not to take it too seriously. He had only been joking about going to Japan. Jin-Ho blinked, confused by the sudden reversal, but Jin Wu didn't explain further. Instead, he simply told him to head home and rest. Jin-Ho nodded reluctantly, still uncertain, watching as Jin Wu exited the office with quiet resolve. The walk back to his apartment was a silent one. Jin Wu's thoughts drifted, memories surfacing like waves. He recalled his battle with the architect. Even without his shadow soldiers, that being had pushed him to his limit. That fight proved something he hadn't wanted to admit. He wasn't the strongest, at least not yet. There were still others out there who could stand above him. When he stepped into his apartment, the familiar scent of home welcomed him. His mother smiled brightly at the sight of him, asking if he would be staying for dinner. He gave a small nod, and while the food was served, he glanced around and asked where Jenna was. His mother, still cheerful, explained that she hadn't been hungry and had gone back to her room. As Jin Wu sat at the dinner table, His mind drifted between thoughts of Jinho's father and the lingering worry in his sister's eyes. Eventually, he looked up from his plate and softly said that he would be leaving again. His mother didn't argue. She simply smiled, the same quiet smile she always wore in moments like this, and said she would help him pack once he finished his meal. With a full stomach and a firmer resolve, Jin-Woo walked quietly to Jenna's room. The door creaked slightly as he entered. His sister lay on her bed, restless even in her sleep, her body shifting beneath the blanket, as if her dreams too were weighed down by worry. He sat beside her without a word, taking a moment before gently placing a comforting hand on hers. He told her in a calm voice that he had faced death countless times, and every single time he came back alive. He thanked her for caring, for worrying, and promised that this time would be no different. Though her eyes remained closed, Jenna's lips trembled, her voice barely a whisper as she cracked and said he would have gone regardless. Jin-Woo didn't deny it. He simply looked at her with warmth and summoned his shadow ants. As the towering figures appeared behind him, he reassured her that no matter where he went, no matter how far, she would never be left unguarded. The following day, Chairman Go stood before a sea of reporters, his expression solemn. The atmosphere was tense, cameras already rolling, pens poised, eyes locked on the man at the center of the storm. He stepped up to the microphone, clearing his throat before delivering the words everyone had been waiting for. Hunter Jin Wu, he announced, would be officially joining the S-rank gate mission in Japan. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd just as Jin Wu appeared beside him. The sound of camera shutters intensified, rapid and relentless, as reporters surged forward for a clearer shot. He stepped forward and shook Chairman Go's hand, sealing his commitment with quiet finality. Later at the airport, Jin-Woo and Jin-Ho arrived together. Shoulders squared, expressions sharp, determination radiating from both of them. The crowd that had gathered quickly took notice, and once again the flashes began, each click trying to capture the moment before they stepped into uncertainty. Representing the Agent Guild, the two stood side by side, ready to cross the sea into chaos. Whatever waited for them in Japan, they had already made their choice. News of Jin-Woo's decision to join the mission in Japan spread fast, even across the ocean. In Maryland, deep within the headquarters of America's elite, a cluster of S-rank hunters gathered around a long table. Their conversations already drifted to the Korean hunter who had now taken the spotlight. Murmurs filled the room, laced with doubt and scoffs.
One of them. He leaned back in his chair, pointing out how even Lady Selna, the psychic who had pushed their powers beyond normal human limits, had failed to enhance Jin-Woo by a single stage. To them, that was all the proof they needed. If Selna couldn't awaken him further, then Jin-Woo had already hit his ceiling. No amount of Jeju Island fame would change that. Clearing an S-rank gate, he claimed, was on a completely different level. The ants were one thing, but giants! That was a death wish. Their confidence swelled as the conversation devolved into bets. A sleek yacht, a mountain estate, even a luxury villa were thrown on the table, each wager riding on the same belief. Jin-Woo wouldn't last a day in Japan. But then from the corner of the room, a quiet voice broke through the arrogance. Thomas Andre didn't even look up from his meal as he cut into his steak, the calm of a man who'd heard enough. With a small smirk, he declared that he'd bet his scavenger guild's entire building on Jin-Woo making it out alive. The room fell silent. Eyes turned toward him, half in disbelief, half in irritation. Instead of arguing, Thomas gave them a blunt reminder. With the dungeon break fast approaching right here on their soil, maybe they should stop worrying about Japan and start asking how many of them would survive. The silence thickened, some rolling their eyes, others shifting uncomfortably. One muttered under his breath that Thomas always had a way of killing the vibe, but Thomas only chuckled under his breath, leaning back in his chair with a shrug. Maybe Japan would have been more fun after all. Still, he had a feeling the real chaos was just beginning, right where he was. Meanwhile, in the heart of Japan, the situation was growing increasingly desperate. The military personnel were overwhelmed, scrambling to assist the flood of injured and helpless civilians. At a crowded nursing home, a soldier wiped sweat from his brow as he was approached by an elderly couple, their faces worn yet calm, supporting several immobile patients behind them. He tried to usher them away, warning that there was no room left, and that they needed to evacuate before the giants got any closer. But the old man refused to move. He spoke gently but firmly, saying they had promised these patients they wouldn't leave their side, not even at the end. Something in the soldier shifted. He hesitated, then quietly made his decision to stay with them, knowing full well what that meant. He turned to help guide them to the safest area he could find, only for a shadow to suddenly cast over them. A massive giant loomed above, the limp body of a human, still clenched in its jaws like a trophy. The soldier's stomach sank as he raised his weapon, joined by the others. Gunfire erupted, but the bullets were useless. The giant kept advancing, its massive hand lunging forward toward one of the soldiers shielding the elderly couple, and then, in a blur of motion, a black spear tore through the air, piercing the giant's chest with explosive force. The impact was so powerful it sent the towering creature flying, crashing through several buildings before finally skidding to a lifeless halt. The soldiers froze, eyes wide with disbelief. Towering where the attack had originated stood a figure, tall, fearsome, and unmistakably inhuman. Jima, the Nagabo's shadow soldier, stood silent, black spear in hand, his gaze locked on the battlefield. For a moment, the soldiers couldn't tell if they were witnessing reality or a waking dream. Then Jin Wu stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. He told them to evacuate immediately. This area wasn't safe. Before anyone could react, rubble from a shattered building began to fall toward the old couple, but a shield rose just in time. Jin-Ho, breath steady and stance firm, had thrown himself into the path, intercepting the debris. He called out to Jin-Woo, his voice unwavering, as he declared he would stay behind to assist with the evacuations. Jin-Woo gave a slight nod, acknowledging Jin-Ho's determination. Then, without another word, he turned, stepping forward with a heavy presence. His aura rose like a dark storm, with shadows stirring around him. Jin-Woo readied himself for the battlefield ahead. Jima thrust into his first battle, unleashing a storm of unrestrained fury. Each step he took shook the earth. His black spear spun with a savage rhythm as he tore through the giants one by one. One after another the giants fell before his raw power. There was no hesitation, no mercy, only carnage in his path, a trail of broken bodies left behind like shattered statues. Above him, Jin-Woo charged forward, sprinting across Jima's towering back before launching into the air. His grip tightened around the demon monarch's dagger, its dark edge pulsating with lethal intent as he soared toward one of the giants. His eyes locked onto its face, and with a single brutal stroke, Jin-Woo split the giant's skull clean down the middle. The body collapsed in a heap before it could even register what had happened. Above the chaos, helicopters buzzed nervously. Reporters inside peered down with wide eyes, their cameras capturing what felt like a myth in motion. The giants were being torn apart effortlessly by Jin-Woo's summoned army. It was a massacre, and they were watching the ascension of a war hero. As the towering beasts continued to fall, one after another, a piercing scream cut through the chaos. A young girl, no older than 12, darted through the wreckage with terror in her eyes. Her cries echoed off broken walls and crumbling concrete, chased closely by the thunderous steps of a giant. Its massive hands stretched out, casting a shadow over her trembling form, ready to claim its next victim. Then in an instant, a violet flash tore across the air, like lightning made solid. The giant's wrist exploded with sparks and blood as a blade carved through it mid-reach. The monster reeled back, howling in pain, its severed hand crashing to the ground. From the smoke, Igris emerged, his long red plume flickering like flame. His demon monarch sword hummed with residual energy. Without a word, he placed himself between the girl and the monster, unmoving, a silent wall of protection. Before the giant could recover, a deafening roar shook the battlefield. Iron hurtled through the air like a cannonball, axe raised high above his head. His descent was swift and merciless. The moment his weapon connected with the giant's skull, the air itself seemed to split. The impact sent a powerful gust rippling outward, flattening debris and dust in its wake. As the giant collapsed in a heap, its eyes already lifeless, still shivering, the little girl clung to Igris's body, finding safety in the stoic knight's presence. Iron stood tall, his stance unwavering.
Iron stood proudly at the top of the fallen beast, his axe in one hand, flashing a playful wink as if to say the job was done. Meanwhile, Igris knelt beside the girl, resting a gloved hand gently on her head. His gesture was calm and reassuring, telling her without words that no harm would come to her now. Jin Wu watched the scene unfold, a rare sense of pride filling him as he observed Iron in action. The towering knight, now stronger after his recent upgrade, was holding his own with impressive force and precision. As Jin Wu stood amidst the aftermath, a soldier cautiously approached, his nerves evident in his expression. Despite being overwhelmed by the chaos they had just survived, he managed to offer a few words of thanks. Jin Wu responded with a calm, reassuring thumbs up. The gesture struck something in the soldier, who nodded back, still shaken, but visibly comforted. Jin Wu then turned his gaze toward Jin-Ho, giving him a firm nod and instructing him to stay behind and assist the soldier with the evacuation. Without hesitation, Jin-Ho gave a short affirmative, stepping up beside the soldier and quickly leading him away from the danger zone. With that resolved, Jin Wu shifted his attention back to the massive corpse lying before him. Standing beside the fallen giant, a command slipped from his lips like a whisper laced with power. Arise. The shadows beneath the giant trembled, then surged upward as 6 colossal forms emerged one by one. Their eyes glowed with dark loyalty, their forms now bound to Jin Wu's will. He didn't dwell on their identities, there was no need for ceremony. He simply numbered them from 1 to 6. Each giant received its name and its place in his ever-growing army. Baru appeared shortly after, always prompt, reporting each successful subjugation with unwavering loyalty. As more giants fell, Baru kept count, providing updates on their expanding control over Japan. The battle so far had unfolded in Jin Wu's favor. His army of shadows, scattered across cities, worked with tireless efficiency. This war of attrition favored him completely. His mana reserves seemed endless, allowing his soldiers to fight without pause. Even in defeat, they simply regenerated and returned to battle. But the war wasn't without complications. While the giants were being dealt with, the S-rank gate's presence had triggered numerous other dungeon breaks. Swarms of lower-ranked monsters were spilling out into urban centers, bringing fresh waves of chaos. Still in the midst of it all, Japan was slowly being reclaimed. The once hopeless situation was stabilizing, and at the heart of it all stood Jin Wu. At the Japanese Hunters Association headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. but filled with awe. Officials stared at the growing list of recovered cities, their expressions frozen with disbelief. No one could deny the impact Jin Wu was making. For Chairman Matsumoto, the shock ran deeper than most. He stood in silence, his mind reeling back to their first meeting. He remembered clearly how he had rushed to greet Jin Wu at the airport, desperate to salvage what little control they had left. Without hesitation, he had asked the Korean hunter to focus solely on defending Osaka, explaining that the giants were closing in and that they would request support from other nations in the meantime. He hadn't expected resistance, he had expected compliance, at the very least cooperation. But Jin Wu had refused calmly, bluntly, and without any intention of compromise. The officials present at the time had been stunned, left speechless by his defiance. Now, watching the impossible unfold, city by city, Matsumoto finally understood. Jin Wu hadn't come to defend from the very beginning. He had come to wipe them all out, alone. Days had slipped by like a slow-burning fuse. On the 7th day since the dungeon break, night draped itself over the ruined shell of Tokyo. Jin-Woo and Jin-Ho walked in silence through the city's wreckage. The once vibrant streets now lay as a hollow echo of what they used to be. Jin-Ho glanced around, his heart sinking as he took in the devastation. Just then, a familiar presence emerged from the shadows. It was Hanekawa, the A-rank hunter, who had stayed behind when everyone else had fallen or fled. Her face was pale, not from fear, but from the weight of what she had witnessed. Without needing to be asked, Hanekawa confirmed what Jin-Woo had sensed long before her arrival. Tokyo had no hunters left. The destruction was absolute. The giants had used this place as their ground zero, fanning out to wreak havoc across the nation. She gave him the numbers next, cold, final. 16 S-rank hunters remained globally, Jin-Woo included. 6 were still in Japan, the rest scattered across China, Canada, India, Russia, and England. Yuri Orlov, alongside 2 others, had fallen. Even the most powerful weren't immune to the chaos that had erupted. Hanekawa's voice trembled slightly as she recounted the losses, but she remained composed. There were still 31 giants left. One had already begun crossing the ocean, heading toward China. The others were scattered but slowing, thanks in large part to Jin-Woo's army of shadows, fighting beside the remaining hunters. Still, the threat was far from over, and Jin-Woo knew it. He wondered if the system's architect had truly died back then. Then who was carrying out this vision now? Or had it already been set in motion long before? Perhaps that castle had been more than just a challenge. It had been a glimpse into a possible future. Jin-Woo clenched his fist. He had overcome that place once, trained in its fire, bled within its walls, and now that strength would be put to the ultimate test. If what he saw was a warning, then this right now was the chance to rewrite that fate. The final battle loomed ahead, and Jin-Woo was ready. With calm, unwavering confidence, Jin-Woo signaled that it was time to move. Hanekawa hesitated for a moment, uncertain, noting that the other hunters hadn't arrived yet. But Jin-Woo, calm and composed, assured her they were already here. That's when the sound began, a low, rhythmic thud echoing across the shattered cityscape. The ground trembled faintly as, one by one, dark silhouettes emerged from the fog. They climbed atop broken rooftops, stood silently upon ruined ledges, and filled the street corners like shadows cast by a god. Then, behind Jin-Woo, his most trusted summons, Tusk, Iron, and Igris, stepped out of the shadows. Hanekawa could only watch, frozen in awe, as the sheer magnitude of their power unfolded before her eyes. Jin-Woo's shadow soldiers had arrived. Their presence alone shifted the air, but the sight didn't end there. The rest of Jin-Woo's army flowed in, hundreds of shadow soldiers spreading like ink through the city, filling every space, their forms rippled with black energy, glowing eyes locked on their king. Then, in a perfectly timed motion, they all dropped to one knee, an entire army of shadows pledging themselves in total, unwavering loyalty. But the moment wasn't complete, not yet. From the sky, a streak of dark lightning flashed downward with a massive thud. Baru landed in a crater of his own making, the ground shattering beneath him, his wings curled behind his back as he bowed deeply before Jin Wu, his voice crackling with pride as he addressed his sovereign. Jin Wu gave him a nod, commending his soldiers for their performance, then turned toward Jin-Ho. He instructed him to fall back and protect Hanekawa. Without question, Jin-Ho obeyed as he led her away to a safer vantage point. Once Jin-Ho was safely out of harm's way, Jin Wu turned his attention to the battlefield. He summoned the remaining shadow forces, his will burning bright as they prepared for the final assault. Standing atop a cliff, Jin Wu turned his gaze toward the battlefield. With a commanding presence, he summoned the towering forms of the shadow giants, his newly acquired weapons of war. They stepped into formation at the front, their massive bodies forming an unstoppable wall of strength. Below him, his army, a blend of loyal summons and fallen enemies, stood ready, awaiting his command. Raising his hand, Jin Wu pointed ahead, and with a single word, declared, "Unleash them!" At that moment, Baru flung his head back and let out a thunderous screech that tore through the ruins like a war cry. The shadow army roared in response, charging forward as one. The earth trembled beneath their feet, a black tide surging across the wasteland into the domain of the final guardian. Dust whipped through the air, buildings shook at their foundations, and the oppressive atmosphere grew heavier with every step closer to the gate's protector. But as they breached the heart of the city, everything shifted, or there it stood, the final giant. Unmoved by the approaching sea of shadows, the creature remained eerily calm. It didn't flinch, it didn't even adjust its stance. Then, in the blink of an eye, it vanished. The giant reappeared mid-air like a phantom, its sword already in motion. And then destruction. With a single swing, half of Jin Wu's front line was obliterated. Shadows burst into smoke as the enormous blade tore through them like paper, cleaving the battlefield apart. Without pause, the giant landed, its sword raised again, cutting a direct path through Jin Wu's ranks. The shockwave alone flattened nearby buildings. Jin Wu narrowed his eyes. He wasn't easily shaken, but even he had to admit this giant was on another level. Its swordplay was precise, fast, and devastating. Its aura pulsed like a living storm, magic power so dense it warped the air around it. How could a being so monstrous even exist? The sheer presence of it gnawed at his mind. But Jin Wu knew there were only two choices: turn away or destroy it. And he had never been one to turn away. Tusk, now towering in his full battle form, stepped forward to face the monstrosity. Wasting no time, he drew in a deep breath and unleashed a massive pillar of flame. The searing blast would have incinerated any ordinary magic beast, but this giant wasn't like the others. With a calm motion, it raised its massive palm, blocking the fire effortlessly, untouched, unmoved. A shadow giant leapt in from the side, but the titan pivoted effortlessly and bisected it with a brutal sweep of its sword. Smoke filled the air as more shadows were crushed beneath its heel. Ant soldiers scrambled to overwhelm it, but they were trampled like insects. Baru, enraged by the giant's rampage, prepared to charge. But Jin Wu raised a hand, stopping him. It wasn't time yet. Baru stepped back reluctantly, taking position beside Igris, both poised for battle, yet holding back, waiting for the signal. Their eagerness was clear, but Jin-Woo had a plan. He had anticipated this challenge. The giant's strength and defense were overwhelming, but Jin-Woo wasn't without strategy. He had more than enough mana, but he knew he had to be patient. His army was immortal, perfect for probing the enemy's weaknesses. The giant continued its assault, crushing shadow soldiers beneath its feet and slamming its fists into the ground with terrifying force. Yet even as they fell, the shadows rose again, relentless. Jin-Woo observed from a distance, eyes narrowed, mana draining steadily with each resurrection. Then something caught his eye. The giant's body was cloaked in powerful magic, a constant barrier that gave it confidence, even arrogance. It didn't bother to defend, not until one moment. Just once, it raised its arm to block an incoming attack. That told Jin-Woo everything he needed to know. Without wasting a second, he summoned his flying mount, Kaisel. With a single powerful flap, Kaisel rose into the air. Jin-Woo leapt onto his back, calling out to Baru and Igris. Baru unfurled his wings while Igris silently climbed aboard, behind Jin-Woo. With both Baru and Igris on board, Kaisel let out a piercing cry and launched into the sky, his wings flapping powerfully, slicing through the air as they ascended, soaring straight toward the giant's head. Though surrounded by 1,000 shadow soldiers, the giant's sharp eyes immediately caught sight of the approaching threat. Its gaze shifted, locking onto Kaisel with immediate awareness. Igris was the first to strike. His demon monarch's sword flashed violet, sending a streak of lightning toward the giant's forehead, but the massive creature reacted swiftly, tilting its head just enough to evade. Igris didn't falter. He followed with another powerful swing, faster and more precise, but the giant dodged again, moving with unreal speed for its size. From Kaisel's back, Jin-Woo observed every movement, analyzing the giant's reactions. Igris kept up the pressure, unleashing strike after strike, forcing the creature on the defensive. Finally, the giant swung its enormous sword upward, aiming to swat them out of the sky. But in perfect sync, Jin-Woo and Igris leapt from Kaisel's back just before impact, narrowly avoiding the blade. Jin-Woo's eyes sharpened. He had seen what he needed. He had found the weak spot. Igris launched another burst of lightning from above, blinding and loud. The crackling energy struck the giant's upper face, disorienting it just long enough. Jin-Woo surged forward like a bolt, his dagger drawn. With one swift, vicious motion, he carved across the giant's eye. A guttural roar shook the battlefield as the beast recoiled in pain. Then came Baru, diving in with claws bared. He slammed into the giant, tearing deep into its flesh and forcing its defenses to crumble. The onslaught didn't let up. Jin-Woo, now locked in, activated ruler's authority and rocketed toward the giant's face. Below, Hanakawa watched in awe. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was war between monsters. Lightning from Igris continued to rain down, staggering the giant. Jin-Woo seized the moment. He summoned more daggers and activated mutilation. With a flash of fury, he tore into the giant's torso. One dagger sliced its eye further, fluid erupting and spraying across the air, while the others ripped into muscle and bone. The giant thrashed wildly, but Jin-Woo clung on and called for Baru. In an instant, Baru joined him, flying straight into the exposed wound. Together, they assaulted the creature's face. Jin-Woo tore through the giant's tissue, while Baru shredded its flesh without pause. Blood sprayed, bone cracked, and the giant let out one final scream before collapsing. Its towering form crashed to the ground with a thunderous boom. Right after, a system notification flashed before Jin-Woo. The enemy had been defeated. A series of notifications followed, and with them came the familiar message: he had leveled up. Jin-Woo noted it calmly, aware that the enemy had been defeated. Jin-Ho, breathless and brimming with excitement, rushed over, calling out to Jin-Woo with his usual enthusiasm, clearly in awe of how decisively the giant boss had been taken down. But Jin-Woo remained composed. Something felt off. The system hadn't acknowledged the dungeon's completion, and there was no confirmation of the dungeon boss being defeated. He immediately sensed that the raid wasn't over. Attempting shadow extraction on the fallen giant yielded no result. That was when he realized something was wrong. While he was contemplating these unexpected developments, a sudden surge of mana erupted from the S-rank gate. Jin-Woo's eyes widened in shock as they landed on the giant's corpse. The massive creature had released an overwhelming amount of magical energy upon death, creating a blast that wiped out everything nearby. Jin-Woo's senses sharpened as he recognized the chaotic surge of energy. It was a magic storm. His first instinct was to check on Jin-Ho. He spun around, tense but relaxed, when he saw Jin-Ho safely protected in Igris's arms, unharmed by the blast. All the mana that had once resided within the giant's body had now been absorbed into the nearby gate, as if the gate itself had devoured it. Amidst the strange phenomenon, Jin-Woo felt a sharp sting on his cheek, only then realizing he had been cut, an unfamiliar experience, as no ordinary magic had ever left a mark on him before. Determined to uncover the truth, Jin-Woo instructed Jin-Ho to stay behind. Without hesitation, he turned toward the ominous gate. As he entered, the vastness of the dungeon struck him immediately. It was unlike any he had encountered before. Immense and boundless, far larger than any high-ranking dungeon he had seen. Beru's heightened senses suddenly picked up on something. He alerted his legion to an odd sound, faint but distinct. A strange laughter echoed from deep within. Jin-Woo heard it too and was taken aback. Someone was laughing even after he had entered the gate. His expression hardened. With a silent nod, he gave the signal to move forward, deeper into the dungeon. The foul laughter grew louder until Jin-Woo finally came upon a massive figure bound in thick black chains, the restraints wrapped around its neck, torso and limbs. Some of them pierced directly through its flesh. Despite being restrained, the giant seemed amused, flashing a toothy grin. It welcomed Jin-Woo, addressing him as a monarch, as if acknowledging something about him. Jin-Woo stepped forward, understanding this was the true boss of the dungeon. The giant demanded to be freed, claiming he had information about the rulers and needed to speak with the monarchs. But as he studied Jin-Woo closer, his tone shifted. The amusement drained from his face, replaced by confusion and anger. He had mistaken Jin-Woo for someone else, and this realization frustrated him deeply. Piecing the giant's words together, Jin-Woo asked whether the rulers were the ones who had imprisoned him in chains. The giant confirmed it, saying he had been trapped and used by the rulers in preparation for a much larger war. This, he claimed, was only the beginning. Jin-Woo was intrigued not just by the implication of a greater conflict, but by the giant's intelligence. He pressed for more information, asking who the rulers really were. The answer came with a revelation. The rulers were ancient enemies of the monarchs, a statement that gave Jin-Woo pause. If the monarchs were at war with the rulers, and Jin-Woo was becoming more and more entangled with the monarchs, did that make the rulers his enemies too? The giant confirmed his suspicions. He revealed that he too was a monarch and explained that both factions, the monarchs and the rulers, were targeting Jin-Woo. According to him, Jin-Woo lacked the power to stand against either side and would need more than strength to survive. He would need influence, a means to tip the balance. Offering his help, the giant proposed that if Jin-Woo released him, he would assist in giving him the influence he needed. But Jin-Woo remained cautious. The idea of a monster offering help to a human was absurd to him, hard to trust. Yet the giant, unbothered, promised to prove his intentions. Suddenly, the giant began to chant. His lips moved at an unnaturally rapid pace, words spilling out like a distorted recording as he muttered in an ancient, unfamiliar tongue. The strange cadence set Jin-Woo on edge, and without hesitation he summoned his daggers prepared for a surprise attack. But the giant showed no intent to strike. He simply continued the incantation with eerie composure. A familiar chime echoed in Jin-Woo's ears as the system interface appeared before him. The message identified the being in front of him as Ligia, King of Giants and Monarch of the Beginning. It explained that Ligia had activated an ancient spell known as the Oath of Faith, a binding pact that would prevent both parties from speaking any falsehood. Once accepted, the message ended with a prompt asking Jin-Woo whether he wished to accept the Oath of Faith. After a brief moment of reflection, Jin-Woo made his decision and accepted the oath. Another system chime echoed, confirming the pact had been sealed. With the Oath of Faith now active, both Jin-Woo and Ligia were bound. Neither could speak a lie until the oath was mutually revoked. The rules were in effect. Ligia, now bound by truth, repeated his earlier offer. If Jin-Woo freed him, he would lend his strength in the battles ahead. Curious to test the oath's influence, Jin-Woo tried to express trust. But the moment he did, his throat tightened and no words came out. The King of Giants laughed heartily, clearly entertained by Jin-Woo's reaction. He reminded him that the Oath of Faith was working exactly as intended. No falsehoods could slip past. Realizing the full weight of the pact, Jin-Woo asked directly why Ligia could speak so fluently, unlike the other creatures that had emerged from the gates. The King of Giants appeared confused by the question, prompting Jin-Woo to clarify. He was referring to the monsters from the dungeons, the ones that never spoke with reason. Ligia's tone grew more serious. He explained that Jin-Woo had made a flawed comparison. The monarchs were not like those monsters, they ruled over them. The beings Jin-Woo had encountered were the residents of chaos, stragglers, prisoners, warped by centuries of servitude. Their minds had long since broken, leaving behind only instincts and rage. But Ligia was different. As a monarch and a king, he had preserved his mind through the ages, resisting the madness of captivity. He had waited patiently and silently for the one who might finally set him free. Shifting gears, Jin-Woo pressed for more information, this time about the silver-armored winged soldiers. Were they with the rulers? Tao Ligia confirmed it. Those beings were indeed part of the ruler's army. When Jin-Woo asked why the rulers were sending such creatures along with demons to Earth, Ligia calmly reminded him that he had already revealed the answer. The rulers were preparing for war. Earth was to be their battlefield, a stage set for the inevitable clash between monarchs and rulers. Jin-Woo still couldn't grasp how sending monsters to Earth would turn it into a battlefield until the King of Giants explained. The ruler's plan was simple: to flood the human world with magic energy, transforming it into an arena brimming with mana. Jin-Woo was taken aback, trying to process the weight of those words. If the monsters that emerged from the gates were considered disasters, then the magical energy they brought with them had been seen as a blessing by many. Not just hunters, but civilians too, believed that mana crystals and gems were priceless resources. These objects had become the world's most vital energy source. But now Jin-Woo realized that these so-called blessings were nothing more than stepping stones, foundations laid in preparation for war. The King of Giants continued, revealing that the best way to plant magic in a mana-deprived world was through the blood of those who already carried it. The rulers had chosen to sacrifice hostages and release monsters to infuse Earth with magic energy. The more blood spilled, the thicker the mana concentration became. Magic was strengthening the world, not to protect it, but to make sure it didn't collapse under the weight of the war to come. According to the King of Giants, the rulers were preparing the world to survive the conflict, not avoid it. Still piecing everything together, Jin-Woo asked what kind of war Ligia meant. The King of Giants explained that it would be a rematch between the monarchs and the rulers, and Earth was the battleground. Hell was coming, and it would arrive sooner than anyone expected. There wasn't much time left. Neither side would sit idle now that Jin-Woo had made contact. In fact, the rulers might already be on the move. Jin-Woo couldn't shake the feeling that both sides were focused on him, targeting him. He asked, "Why? Why does it feel like everyone is after me?" Then came the truth. The power within Jin-Woo wasn't truly his. Ligia explained that the original owner of that power had betrayed the rulers by transferring it to Jin-Woo. That single act had painted a target on his back, marking him as an enemy of both monarchs and rulers alike. Yet amid all the tension, the King of Giants made a vow. He promised to stand by Jin-Woo's side and fight alongside him. All he asked in return was to be freed from his chains. Jin-Woo's eyes sharpened as he considered the offer. He asked, "If Ligia truly wished to help, wouldn't it be easier to become one of my shadow soldiers?" The King of Giants flinched at the suggestion, visibly shaken. In that moment he saw the shadow of the true monarch flicker behind Jin-Woo's human form. Ligia then explained why it was impossible. Monarchs and rulers existed in astral form, spiritual bodies, and when an astral body was destroyed, it vanished entirely, leaving nothing behind that could be reanimated or turned into a shadow. That was why he couldn't become one of Jin-Woo's soldiers. Jin-Woo listened, understanding. Yet something still didn't feel right. A piece of the puzzle was missing. As the thoughts swirled, Jin-Woo summoned a dagger to his hand while the King of Giants pleaded again to be set free. Jin-Woo stepped forward with resolve, asking once more if Ligia would truly be on his side. The King of Giants nodded solemnly, and Jin-Woo began cutting through the chains, one by one. The shackles fell away, and Ligia remained composed, but as Jin-Woo moved to break another chain, he paused, his gaze fierce, and asked, "Would you also stand on the side of humanity?" Yet at this time, Ligia remained silent. Jin-Woo didn't need an answer. The oath of faith made lying impossible, and that silence spoke volumes. His eyes shifted to the back of Ligia's neck, where a cold, glinting magic stone was embedded. That stone was the key. It bound him to the ruler's will. As long as it remained, Ligia was still under their control, still a threat to humanity. Without warning, murderous intent erupted from the King of Giants as he swung his newly freed arm at Jin-Woo. Realizing the danger, Ligia decided Jin-Woo could no longer be allowed to live. But Jin-Woo moved first, ducking low beneath the attack, then driving his dagger upward deep into Ligia's chest. Up close, Jin-Woo muttered coldly, "You would have been a calamity." But the King of Giants responded with a twisted grin, claiming that the true calamity wasn't him, it was Jin-Woo. With his mind made up, Jin-Woo struck, again and again, dodging desperate counterattacks as he buried his blades deeper. After several brutal blows, the King of Giants finally went still, blood gushing from his mouth. Even in death's grip, Ligia's last words came as a venomous curse. He warned that as the war between humans and the residents of Chaos escalated, Earth would become a battlefield. He hoped everything Jin-Woo loved would burn to ashes. But Jin-Woo's gaze remained cold, unwavering. Without hesitation, he swung his dagger one final time, slicing through the giant's neck in a single, decisive motion. The sound of steel slicing air echoed through the dungeon as the King of Giants was beheaded. A system notification immediately followed, confirming the defeat of the dungeon boss, Ligia, one of the 9 original monarchs. Jin Wu had gained an immense amount of experience points. As the system struggled to tally it, he looked down at the magic stone in his hand, taken from Ligia's body. Though he'd hoped for a new shadow soldier, he decided the stone would be enough, a souvenir from this brutal encounter. From Ligia's body came a final surge of powerful energy before his form disintegrated into dust. In the aftermath, a familiar chime sounded. The system displayed the results. Jin-Woo had leveled up multiple times. His new level was now 122. News of the giant's annihilation spread like wildfire across the world. Social media lit up with excitement, and talks of a new national-level hunter were everywhere. But unlike the Jeju Island incident, this wasn't just a Korean headline. Recognition poured in from all corners of the globe. One giant had managed to escape overseas but didn't get far. China's Lua gang took it down before it could cause any real damage. In Japan, a different storm was brewing. Chairman Matsumoto of the Hunters Association turned himself in. Though he didn't offer much explanation, many believed it was an attempt at redemption, a way to shoulder the weight of his past betrayals. But even as the news made waves, speculation over his true motives continued to stir. Jin-Woo, meanwhile, stepped out of the gate, far removed from the world's noise. He walked in silence, his mind lingering on the choice he'd made. Killing the King of Giants had been necessary. Letting Ligia roam free would have been a disaster waiting to happen. He didn't regret it, but the weight of that decision still lingered more than ever. He knew he had to grow stronger. The S-rank gate was cleared, and the battlefield was quiet around Jin-Woo. The fallen giant's shadows stood ready. The soldiers nearby, having witnessed his power for the first time, could hardly believe what they had seen. They whispered among themselves, unable to hide their shock. Jin-Ho, catching their glances, stood a little taller, proud to stand next to the man who commanded such fear and respect. Then Hanekawa approached, drawing Jin-Ho's attention. He assumed she had something for Jin-Woo, but to his surprise, the message was for him, a phone call.
He answered, and immediately something changed. His face tightened, the color drained. Whatever he heard hit hard. Jin-Ho turned to Jin-Woo, apologizing. He had to return to Korea. Something had come up with his family. Without waiting for questions, he headed for the helicopter that was already waiting. As it lifted into the sky, Jin-Woo remained still, his thoughts heavy. Jin-Ho sat in silence, his mind racing. His mother's voice on the call had trembled, shaken in a way he hadn't heard before. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Still, he tried to brush it off as nothing while the helicopter carried him home. Jin-Ho arrived at the airport in Korea, still unsure of what to expect. Secretary Kim was already there, waiting for him. He wasted no time informing Jin-Ho that a car had been arranged. Puzzled but concerned, Jin-Ho followed silently as they made their way out. On the way, Kim spoke with a careful tone, advising Jin-Ho to brace himself, that things weren't looking good. He promised he would explain everything soon. As they neared the hospital, Secretary Kim finally revealed the truth. President Yoon Myung-han, Jin-Ho's father, had fallen into eternal sleep. The words didn't make sense at first, and then they hit all at once. Jin-Ho screamed in anguish, calling out for his father, his voice trembling with disbelief as he tried to rush into the room, only to be held back by Secretary Kim. He explained softly that Jin-Ho's presence, as a hunter still struggling to control his power, could do more harm than good. The mere aura around him could aggravate his father's fragile state.
Staggered by the helplessness, Jin-Ho turned away from the room. Then he noticed Secretary Kim holding a black leather portfolio in his hands. When Jin-Ho asked what it was, the secretary answered gently. It was something President Yu had been working on before collapsing. Hands trembling, Jin-Ho opened it. Tears welled up immediately. Inside were newspaper clippings all centered around him. Gossip pieces, minor press coverage, local write-ups, articles that barely anyone else would care about. Yet each had been carefully cut and stored by his father. The scrapbook was messy but deliberate. Secretary Kim told him then that President Yu's cold distance had never been from a lack of love. On the contrary, his expectations for Jin-Ho had been enormous, just like his love for him. Secretary Kim gave him a moment before suggesting they head back to the residence. Jin-Ho, wiping his face, nodded in silence. As they walked through the hospital corridor, he suddenly stopped. A strange sensation crept through Jin-Ho. He glanced around, sensing something. But the hallway was empty. Kim noticed and asked if anything was wrong, to which Jin-Ho only muttered that it was nothing. They continued walking until the pair finally disappeared around the corner. From a quiet patch of shadow behind them, Jin-Woo stepped out. He had been there the whole time, observing without a word, watching Jin-Ho grieve. It stirred something deep within him. He had come to the hospital unsure of what to do, but now his resolve was clear. Reaching into his inventory, he pulled out a bottle of the elixir of life. The weight of the moment was heavy. His decision was made. Outside, a car pulled up. Jin-Hee stepped out and hurried into the hospital, a sense of heaviness settling on her as she entered the corridor. Her pace slowing, Jin-Hee passed by someone, just a blur in her peripheral vision, but gave it no thought as she reached her father's room. What she saw inside stopped her breath. President Yu was awake. Her eyes flooded with tears as she rushed to his side, stammering with disbelief. He was just as shocked, asking the nearby doctor how this was possible. The doctor, equally stunned, could only describe it as a miracle, something without precedent. While the room filled with emotion, Jin-Woo quietly slipped out through a back exit, unnoticed. Walking alone beneath the pale light outside, he allowed himself a rare, quiet smile. With the bottle now empty and the weight of his decision behind him, he muttered softly into the night, wishing Jin-Ho an early happy birthday. This was his gift to him. Meanwhile, across the ocean in Maryland, the U.S. government held a grand celebration honoring the hunters who had successfully cleared the recently emerged S-rank gate within the state. The atmosphere inside the venue was relaxed, filled with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and casual banter. Hunters mingled freely, some marveling at the sheer scale of the event, others simply enjoying the rare chance to unwind. Then, without warning, a towering figure in a bright Hawaiian shirt stepped in from behind. Conversations quieted for a moment as heads turned toward him. It was Thomas Andre. He didn't say much, just reminded the group about a bet they'd made. His presence alone was enough to make a few of them shift nervously. With a grin, Thomas leaned toward one hunter and casually asked for his tie. The man hesitated, sweat beginning to form, but didn't argue. Wordlessly, he removed the tie and handed it over. Just as the laughter began to return, Thomas's assistant, Laura, entered the room, her tone bringing a different kind of attention. She informed Thomas that the list of guilds participating in the upcoming International Guild Conference had just been released. Among them was Korea's Ajin Guild. Thomas paused for a second, the name unfamiliar, until Laura added that it belonged to son Jin-Woo. That's when a smirk slowly crept across Thomas Andre's face. Korea's strongest hunter was coming to the States, and Thomas couldn't wait to meet him.